The Odyssey is the story of Odysseus' journey back home after the end of the Trojan War. Now, Odysseus is certainly one of the best characters of the Iliad. He's charismatic, he's clever, and he's a great warrior. He arguably deserved to star in the sequel. But in doing so, Odysseus may have fallen victim to Harvey Dent's observation. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Or, if you want to go a bit more highbrow, the threat of Nietzsche. He who fights monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. Spoiler alert, Odysseus is not an unproblematic protagonist. And as most of the events of the Odyssey are recounted by Odysseus himself, it's unclear just how much we should believe them to be true. The Odyssey is a story of a man of twists and turns, and its narrative follows suit. Yada yada fine, it's a masterpiece, but I still dislike Odysseus. The story opens with Athena, who loves Odysseus, complaining to Zeus that Poseidon won't let Odysseus go home because of what happened with his son Polyphemus. Don't worry, we'll get there. Zeus tells her to just wait it out. It's not like the gods are known for harboring endless grudges and holding their mortal enemies in the throes of eternal torment. But what more can you really expect from Zeus? Athena decides to go to Ithaca and make a man out of Odysseus' son, Telemachus. Nearly everyone in Ithaca assumes Odysseus is dead, except for a few people still holding out hope, like Queen Penelope. A bunch of suitors have taken over Odysseus' household, hoping to win Penelope's hand. We know they're the bad guys because they're being bad house guests. Anyway, a disguised Athena convinces Telemachus to go and try to find information about his father. Telemachus sails to the house of old Nestor, who is still very old. Old Nestor tells the story of how he had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to get back from Troy. Old Nestor then sends Telemachus to Sparta to meet with Menelaus and Helen. Menelaus recounts how Agamemnon was murdered by Clytemnestra's lover upon his return. If you're hoping this means Agamemnon can't whine anymore, prepare to be disappointed. The meeting gets sappy and emotional, so Helen drugs them all, as you do. Meanwhile, the suitors back in Ithaca are planning on murdering Telemachus, likely so that we know they're the bad guys. Athena goes back to Zeus and complains that the nymph Calypso has been holding Odysseus as a semi-willing sex slave for 7 years. Zeus has trouble with the concept of consent, so he fails to see much of a problem, but he sends Hermes anyway to get Calypso to release Odysseus. Calypso complains that the male gods are held to different standards and it's not fair. It's a valid point, but sex slavery is still sex slavery, so Hermes convinces her to let her Greek boy toy go. Odysseus sets out from Calypso's island, but Poseidon is still pissed about what happened to his son Polyphemus. We'll get there. Poseidon sends Odysseus into a hurricane, but Athena manages to get him onto a beach. Odysseus finds a young princess named Nausicaa, who is doing her washing. Realizing that he is a dirty, naked, middle-aged man, Odysseus decides that simply grabbing the young girl by the knees as a way of greeting would be in bad taste. Yeah, no shit. He does, however, let the girl bathe him. She then dresses him and brings him back to the Phaeacian court. Nausicaa's father, King Alcinous, greets Odysseus with an open mind and throws a banquet in his honor. After a herald sings of the Trojan War and triggers Odysseus' PTSD, the king asks Odysseus to tell his story. So strap in, everyone, because Odysseus is about to be that guy at a party who can't stop talking about his European travels. At the end of the war, Odysseus leaves the ruins of Troy with his crew. A storm forces them to land in the Cyclones, where they immediately kill the men and pillage the city. You know, like heroes. They manage to flee, but end up caught in another storm. Odysseus and crew end up on the island of Lotus Eaters. Some of the men eat the lotuses and promptly forget about home. That, or they were worried that their captain was 0 for 2 when it came to not crashing the ship on strange islands and decided to cut their losses. Either way, Odysseus leaves them there. From there, they go to the island of the Cyclops. The Greeks camp out on the beach. Even though they have plenty of goats to hunt and wine that they stole earlier, Odysseus decides that they ought to mooch off the island natives. Odysseus and some men sneak into the giant's cave like they're Ocean's 13 and successfully find stealable goods. But Odysseus won't let them leave. He wants to see the Cyclops. Polyphemus shows up eventually and, upon finding strangers in his home, stealing his food, and demanding gifts, promptly eats 2 of them. Odysseus, the great tactician, pretends his name is no one, gets Polyphemus drunk, and then stabs the Cyclops in the eye, blinding him. The plan works, and the men escape after a couple days. And they would have gotten away with it too if Odysseus could keep his freaking mouth shut. He taunts Polyphemus, giving him his full name and address. Polyphemus attempts to destroy the ship, but eventually settles on asking his father, the freaking god of the sea, to never let Odysseus get home. Next, they end up on the island of Aeolus. The king gifts Odysseus a bag of winds to help them get home. They head out and actually manage to see the shores of Ithaca. Odysseus decides this is a good time to take a nap instead of, steering the ship to shore. His men, lacking a good role model, disobey direct instructions and open the bag of wind, which blows the ship all the way back to Aeolus. Unsurprisingly, the king wants nothing to do with these dumbass Greek warriors who managed to F up a magical bag of wind. Odysseus and crew are attacked at another island by more man-eating giants. Odysseus loses all but the ship he is on. For those keeping score at home, you're better than Odysseus, who is quite vague about how many men he's actually lost thus far. They sail to another island. Odysseus wants the men to go look for food, but they're afraid of more man-eating giants. Can't say I blame them. But Odysseus hangs back at the ship and forces half of his men to go scout the place. They find the house of the goddess Circe, who promptly turns them into pigs. One man escapes and tells Odysseus. Suddenly caring about these men, Odysseus sets out after them. He runs into Hermes, who's just, hanging out. Hermes promises Odysseus that he can sleep with Circe and force her to let his little piggies go. Odysseus pretends to care about that latter thing, and successfully convinces Circe to trade the freedom of his porcine pals for sexual favors. Circe releases the men shortly after, but Odysseus and co stay for an entire year. Eventually, the men tell Odysseus they really ought to get a move on, and Odysseus reluctantly agrees. Circe tells Odysseus he needs to go ask the prophet Tiresias for advice in the underworld. They get down there with a little difficulty due to the magical power of plot convenience. Upon arriving, Odysseus meets the ghost of one of his men who had died back at Circe's. Odysseus hadn't even noticed his absence. Sounds about right. Tiresias gives the spark notes of the rest of the epic for everyone in case they can't stand its protagonist but want to know what happens. Odysseus meets his mom, but it takes him 3 tries to realize that he can't hug a ghost. Idiot. He also finds Agamemnon, who is still whining from beyond the grave. We get the story of his murder again, this time from his point of view. It's even funnier the second time. He sees Achilles and praises him for being a hero. Achilles reminds Odysseus that being dead sucks. Ajax is down there too. He and Odysseus had fought over Achilles' armor. When Odysseus was rewarded it, Ajax killed himself in protest. Like the mature adult he is, Ajax now still refuses to talk to Odysseus. So Odysseus heads back to Circe's island. He sends some men to go find that dead guy's body and bury it. It was literally the least he could do for him. Circe warns him about the dangers that lie ahead. If he survives, she says, all of his men will die. Odysseus tells his men about the lurking monsters, but conveniently leaves out that last bit so that his little piggies would still be willing to at least try and wee him all the way home to Ithaca. The first obstacle is the sirens, whose voices lure men to their deaths. The crew plug their ears with wax, but Odysseus asks to be tied to the mast so that he can hear the siren's song. Maybe he's never heard the expression, curiosity killed the cat. Or maybe he has, but like members of his crew, Odysseus considers cats to be disposable. Next, Odysseus must navigate his ship between Scylla, a 6-headed, jagged-toothed monster, and Charybdis, a giant whirlpool. Scylla devoured 6 men whose last words were, Odysseus! Fellas, both the creature tearing you apart and that churning hole of salt water care more about you than he does. Rest in peace. The ship debarks from the island, Zeus casts it into a horrible storm. The ship is destroyed, all of Odysseus' men are killed, and Odysseus himself washes up on Calypso's island. And now we're all caught up. With his story finished, Odysseus asks King Alcinous to send him home, with gifts please. Alcinous loads him up with goodies and prepares a ship with a full crew to take Odysseus home. Apparently, he wasn't listening when Odysseus freely admitted to losing several ships and their crews over the course of a couple years due to his own gross negligence. Poseidon is still angry about the whole blinding Polyphemus thing, so he gets permission from Zeus to turn the Phaeacian ship and all its inhabitants to stone after dropping off Odysseus. The Ithacan king loses 0 sleep over this tragedy, for which he is entirely responsible, and in fact sleeps through the entire thing. A disguised Athena greets him when he wakes, and the two of them get into a lie-telling contest. Ah, dishonesty. Athena then brings him up to date about the suitor situation in his home. They devise a scheme to disguise Odysseus as an old beggar. Odysseus takes shelter from an elderly servant who has stayed loyal to his master over the past 20 years. Odysseus swears to tell the truth and then lies to the man's face, repeatedly. Meanwhile, Telemachus returns to Ithaca. Odysseus and his son have a reunion, and fine, it's actually kind of heartwarming. Whatever. They casually discuss the mass murder of the suitors like psychopaths. Again, heartwarming. Odysseus returns home to try and claim authority over the household. Odysseus, too, goes home disguised as a beggar. The suitors abuse him, presumably to remind us that they're the bad guys. But Odysseus also ignores his faithful dog Argos, who, after 20 years of waiting for his master, recognizes him but is left unacknowledged to die alone in a heap of manure. Remember, Odysseus is the good guy. Later, Odysseus beats up a homeless person. After that, Penelope speaks with the disguised Odysseus. He torments her to tears by pretending he knows her husband and hinting that he is likely dead. After that, Odysseus' old nurse recognizes him by a scar on his thigh, but he chokes her into silence. The next day, at the mental prompting of Athena, Penelope announces an archery contest using Odysseus' bow. The winner wins her hand in marriage. A few of the suitors try and fail to even string the bow. Telemachus tries, but also fails. It's kind of pathetic, actually. But then Odysseus takes the bow, he strings it in one swift motion, and sends an arrow through the eyes of several axes. Terrified silence from the suitors, and then Odysseus and Telemachus slaughter them all. They had hidden all the weapons, leaving the suitors defenseless. Some beg for mercy, but Odysseus kills each one in turn. You know, like the Trojan War hero he is. Then, he rounds up the servant girls who have been disloyal to him and has them clean up the corpses. Then he hangs all the girls in the courtyard. Odysseus and Penelope have a tearful reunion. He tells her all about his travels, including Circe and Calypso, which smacks a bit of Zeus's foreplay, but whatever. Meanwhile, Hermes has to bring all the suitors' spirits to Hades. They find Agamemnon, who takes the opportunity to whine some more. Odysseus later goes to greet his father, after first making the old man cry by hinting that his son may be dead. Because for the love of all that is holy, Odysseus cannot not be an emotionally manipulative asshole for 2 freaking minutes. Odysseus is accosted by the people of Ithaca, that is, his royal subjects, who aren't exactly pleased that their king brutally murdered almost all of the young men of the kingdom. Fair. Odysseus decides he's going to solve the problem by just killing them all, but Athena steps in because holy shit, Odysseus, you can't do that. The end. No, seriously, that's it.